If you could guarantee anything about the Leaving Cert, Eiléan Chuilleanáin is going to be on the 2018 paper. If you look back over the years, it soon becomes clear that being female and Irish are strongly associated with being on the paper. Ní Chuilleanáin's only competition, Boland, came up last year. Ní Chuilleanáin is definitely one to study. Having said all this, remember that the only way to be safe is to study 5 poets. So we're going to look over Ní Chuilleanáin's themes and imagery. Ní Chuilleanáin's themes are quite familiar to the Irish audience and include Irish nationalism, family, religion, death and women. While the above universal themes are explored in detail, many of her poems seem to be based on personal experiences that require knowledge of the context, leaving the reader to wonder whether their interpretation is anywhere near what the poet intended. At the same time, there is an alluring enigma and an invitation to use one's imagination. So now that we've spoken about her themes, let's talk about her imagery. Her poetry has a cinematic kind of a quality in the sense that it freely cuts to different places and times instead of having a coherent kind of a narrative. So for example, in Death and Engines, we shift from imagery of runways and airplanes to a hospital bed. The poem Street is literally like a screenwriter's remarks. One day he followed her down the slanting lane at the back of the shambles. Translation oscillates between Glasnevin Cemetery and the Magdalen Laundry. Similarly, On Lacking the Killer Instinct, we shift between the hills and then scenes of the speakers, presumably the poet's father's lucky escape. Another interesting aspect of Ní Chuilleanáin's imagery is she constantly questions what's real. There is always a kind of a sense of mystery, a sense that there are layers and layers to what she's trying to say. She alludes to mythology, folklore and fairy tales quite a lot. So obviously the second voyage is based on Homer's The Odyssey. In Following, the square of linen that held 3 drops of her heart's blood is an allusion to the King of Ireland's son, a sad story immersed in Irish mythology. To Niall Woods and Ksenia Ostrovskaya, married in Dublin on 9th of September 2009, is full of complex allusions, including to the King of Ireland's son. All For You is also centred on the idea of a fairy tale house. And put together, the cinematic quality and the poet's questioning of what's real, they come to highlight a concept of transcendence. The concept of transformation and even transcendence is central to her poetry. Eiléan Ní Chuilleanáin's poetry invokes the crossroads between the otherworldly and reality. There are a lot of door thresholds mentioned in her poetry, and that's just one example. If you consider the poet Translation, there is all this transformation on so many different levels. That's a talk in and of itself. The structure of Ní Chuilleanáin's poetry is very free. So it's not directly part of imagery per se, but it's part of form. So how she writes her poetry, it's part of her style. And Ní Chuilleanáin's poetry is very much intellectual and conceptual rather than being musical. Architecture plays an important role in Ní Chuilleanáin's poetry. There are a lot of references to houses and various architectural structures. That seems to be a kind of a hobby of hers that she intertwined with her poetry. This short talk has just been a highlight reel of things that you should include in your essays. If you want more detail, you should definitely go onto our website, and we have sample notes, guides for English and other courses. We have the 625 Lab section where people can send in their essays and get feedback, and we wish you all the best in your studies this year.